Hello, it's great to see you all today in our virtual format. My name is Dylan Brown. I'll be your introductory speaker today for the Executive Consultancy Group number 36. And I'll be speaking to you all today about the topic of moving and beginning a professional life in South Africa. And of course, to understand this better, we have assigned the preparatory video and movie, Kalushi, to kind of give a cultural analysis on it. So without further ado, let's get right into the topic of our discussion today. So culture. Why is it important? Well, culture is the lens through which we conduct business and make strong interpersonal connections. And when you're moving to another country with which you don't have a lot of exposure, it's important to better understand the culture so you can have a more fruitful and enriching experience while you're there, especially with a country with a rich and complex history like South Africa, especially in recent generations. It's important to understand where the history of the culture comes from to better understand the cultural environment of the country today. And it's for this reason that we signed the movie Kalushi, which will be talked about by my colleague Alex.
So Kalushi portrayed the true story of a young black South African man. The movie relates his exile to the South African liberation movement after being brutally beaten by apartheid police in 1976. Then a series of violent events will lead him to stand trial for his life for a murder he did not commit. So the courtroom will be his last battlefield. Finally, he will be executed, and his last words were, "Tell my people that I love them and that they must continue to fight. My blood will nourish the tree that bear the fruit of freedom." So, in several sense, the quick trail and the legal cultural struggle of that Kalushi faced were incentive of the fellow immigrant in apartheid. So now we will analyze the culture of South Africa through an historical lens.
Each culture is unique and responds differently to these 5 dimensions. Regarding South African culture during apartheid, here are their conception of the world. About the human or nature orientation, the South African culture is most focused on badness of human nature. About man-nature orientation is most the mastery over nature. The time orientation is the present and the past because of the cultural origins, and the activity orientation is more about thinking and controlling. The relational orientation is really hierarchical. These dimensions change significantly over the years, but are historically rooted. Now I will give the speech to Rita, who will speak about the societal elements.
Thank you, Laura. Okay. As a whole, the film presents the former rigidity of society and culture in South Africa under the apartheid, where Western culture was seen as higher culture and natives were discriminated for their culture, language, and a way of living. Nowadays, South Africa has many different cultures, which means that there's many opposite cultural traits between citizens, as well as not one heritage for all South Africans. Modern South African constitution is based on equal rights for everybody. The cultural context is generally low context culture, which is common to Western countries where communication is direct, and this is seen in the film. However, film also presents collective high context culture among Kalushi and his friends. High context culture transmits more emotions through communication, as status has an important role in everyday lives. Next, Hamad tells us a little bit more about South Africa's cultural dimensions.
Well, thank you so much, Rita. Well, actually, the dimensions, the Hofstede dimensions, they tell us that what effects of a society's culture on its on the values of its members and how these value relates to the behavior. And if you look at the movie and if you look at the culture dimension of South Africa, we can see, as you can see in the screen, that the power distance is moderate, individualism is relatively high, masculinity is also relatively high. So if you look at all these, it is on most side it is relatively low, and other side it is relatively high, and that's about the Hofstede dimensions. And now I'll give the speech to Dylan so that he can further speak about the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And the film also did a very good job of challenging some of the stereotypes and mental models that we as individuals not familiar with South African culture might have going in, especially with regard to the apartheid and the historical cases of racism in Africa. And the film does a great job of clarifying how things really were by presenting a real story. And in this way, it shows how many of the interpersonal interactions between racial groups and between people of different racial groups are really manifestations and reflections of the deeper culture that's held by the people within South Africa. And by knowing where the history comes from and understanding our own stereotypes as clarified through the film, we can be better knowledgeable and better equipped to avoid missteps and a potential faux pas with our counterparts in South Africa as employees and professionals will be working with such counterparts and representatives in the future. So at least knowing these stereotypes before you go in is an important part of being culturally prepared. And of course, the real world implications are known to many of us from this film. For instance, many of us know about Nelson Mandela, and maybe to a lesser extent, Brayton Breitenbach, a famous reporter who also tried to take the apartheid down. And of course, the living conditions in the country have changed dramatically, as evidenced by the quality of life in Kalushi's native hometown of Mamelodi. And to continue on, I'll hand it over to my colleague.
Sorry.
Thank you so much, Jilan. Indeed, in 1996, South Africa adopted a new constitution which helped them to become more democratic. This constitution supports new opinions and created a dramatical shift in racial and cultural dimension. It's really important to consider the before and after apartheid policy to correctly understand the current situation of South Africa. For instance, the creation of a new flag reflected the wish of creating a new environment for the country, which of course has an impact on the national culture. So now each of us will give his own impression on the movie according to our own cultural background.
Yes. From an American perspective, of course, the lack of freedom and the degree of oppression towards Blacks was certainly disappointing. However, in terms of American legal culture, there were certain parallels that can certainly be drawn between the historical power distance during segregation and the apartheid.
On my side, as a Belgium, I thought that the power distance in my country is lower than in South Africa, especially with the justice that in the movie we can really see that they have a lot of power on the population.
If we talk about Pakistan, there's a lot of the system is a lot of hierarchical. If you have to go there, go at upper level, you have to go by hierarchy, and there's a lot. It's a male-dominated society, and then again, there is a lot of power distance. So it's much more related to the culture of South Africa shown in the movie.
For Thin, it seems like feelings are expressed more openly and religion plays a higher role in everyday lives than it does in Finland.
As a Belgian too, I can add that we could not believe some humiliating scene on our country, humiliating someone for his skin color, his interior, is really. Now I can say for the conclusion, yeah. So through this film, we were able to present to you where South African cultures come from and be cognizant of these aspects when you're working with the South African people. Our training is now complete and we wish you good work in South Africa and hope that we have been useful for you.